I'm joined now by Philippe Nassif. He's the executive director of In Defense of Christians. He's joining us for a very timely conversation about a decision made by the Trump administration to go right around the UN to give direct aid to Christians in the Middle East, particularly to institutions that are doing the most to take care of refugees in the Middle East. And first of all, Philippe, thank you very much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So this is something that I've paid attention to since 2014, and clergy in particular in the Middle East who have done the most to help those displaced by the rise of radical Islam and particularly of ISIS have been begging for this for years, haven't they?
Absolutely. It's been many, many years of sort of pleas from the Christian community for additional direct help.
Mm-hmm.
And, we've worked really hard. Our organization, In Defense of Christians, has worked very hard to sort of change the way, not just the way the United States sort of views persecuted minorities in the region, but also how we deliver direct aid to these people.
Mm-hmm. What is the immediate implication of the fact that the UN is no longer directly involved in sort of curating aid from the U.S. to those in need in the Middle East?
Iraq has faced over a decade of war. And so there's a lot of rebuilding and a lot of rehabilitation to be done across the whole country. But we were asking the United Nations to double down its efforts to help these minorities because they faced extinction. They were literally being driven out of Iraq and exterminated, and all traces of their existence exterminated, from graveyards and olive groves to homes and then people. And so what we wanted to do was we wanted the United Nations to sort of double down and say, these people are facing particularly unique circumstances that could lead to their complete eradication. And we need to do as much as possible to get aid to them as quickly as possible and prioritize them.
Right.
It's not to say that we don't care about everybody else, it's to say that these people face particularly dire circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
The United Nations was unwilling to do that, in short, for a variety of reasons. And so it's been a lot of conversations and a lot of lobbying and a lot of advocacy to sort of get the United States government to make a switch and to send the money that it was appropriating to the United Nations for these areas to then go directly through the United States government to other organizations on the ground.
Well, one little known fact, one thing that I think is really underrated and underknown in the West is many of the pleas that have come from Christians who are most hard hit by the rise of ISIS, they have had nothing to do with refugee resettlement, right? So, there's been plenty of hand-wringing and narrative-driven, emotional, passionate talk in the West about the plight of people hurt by ISIS, but a lot of it kind of tends to miss the central points that are being made by the people in the Middle East themselves, and that tends to not focus quite so much on refugee resettlement as aid to the people there who are waiting out the destruction of ISIS, after which they would like to return home. Isn't that right?
That's exactly correct. Look, people in the region have been talking about this issue for a long time. Persecution didn't just begin with the rise of ISIS. It's been around for a long time in the region. Refugees that fled, that made it to the United States, who were lucky enough to make it here, have been talking about this for a long time. And we've made it a priority of our organization to sort of change the way we deliver aid and get help to these communities. There's a lot of people in DC that say their issue is of utmost importance. And, it's the end of the world if we don't fix this problem. But I can say with full confidence, that if not just our organization, but all of the other organizations that work in this space have not been ferociously ringing the alarm bells that these communities were literally going to be wiped off the face of this earth within a matter of months, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now, Stephen. We wouldn't be talking about this. We would be talking about how there was once a community in Iraq for thousands of years that is no longer there because we didn't do anything about it.
Wow. So how would you contrast your interactions? Because I know you've been doing a lot of, you and other organizations on behalf of Christians in the Middle East and other minorities in the Middle East, you've been lobbying and you've been making a lot of efforts to be a good voice for them in D.C. for years. How would you contrast your experience with the Obama administration, with the experience you've had with, say, Vice President Mike Pence?
I think that we've had more progress made under the current administration, I really don't buy the notion that the previous administration didn't really care about these issues. I mean, we got the genocide declaration done during the Obama administration.
Right, John Kerry in 2015.
That's right. Now, they push back on it because mainly no administration wants to sort of have a genocide happen under their watch.
Right.
We've had some issues with the current administration regarding, refugee resettlement in the United States and how we've, at some point not allowed anybody with an Iraqi passport into the United States, and that includes Christians, and here we are saying, wait a minute, these are the people that are getting killed off. So in short, I'll say that we've had more progress under the current administration. I think that the vice president is personally very invested in this issue.
Yeah.
I think the president does as well, and many people in the administration. But also, I don't want to take the credit away from a lot of the other people like yourselves giving me the opportunity to talk about this to your audience and all of the other folks that care about these issues who've advocated and pushed and educated and reached out to Americans of all faiths and let them know just that there are Christians in the Middle East to begin with,
right,
and that they're facing the threat of annihilation. I mean, that there takes years of advocacy and work, and now we're seeing it pay off with results.
Right. So one of the things that does, I think, help a little is this sort of underdog narrative, the sort of rebellious narrative that, there's a lot of talk in politics in Europe and in the U.S. In which increasingly the UN and the EU and other sort of legacy organizations that are in charge of ensuring the safety and well-being of people are being seen in a more and more negative light. And the Trump administration, by the way, falls into this. A lot of the rhetoric we've heard in 2016 and beyond with Brexit and so forth has that sort of tone of, the UN, the EU, it's none of it's trustworthy. This is all, kind of cynical and nasty politics. We're going to get real now. You know what I mean?
Right.
What are some ways that actually might play out and translate into reality in terms of our being able to get past or around the UN with our aid to those in need in the Middle East?
I think that, you're going to get some pushback from, different elected officials and folks that sort of don't want to see the UN sideline on this particular issue. Whether that actually stymies the implementation of the changes remains to be seen. I doubt that that's really going to happen. We just heard this policy announcement last week, and we're seeing it rolled out already. This was smart, the way the administration did it. We can't wait for Baghdad's political settlements and Kurdish referendums to finish, and we got to do it now. And so to fast track that money directly through organizations that are already on the ground and not through the bureaucracy of the UN it makes total sense.
And thank you for articulating why that makes sense and for doing so for years, going to Washington. It's a thankless job, and you've worked hard at it, and we're very grateful to you. And I'm sure those who are the most hard hit by radical Islam and brutalities in the Middle East are also grateful as well. Say hi to them for me. I'm sure you're in touch with a lot of people on the ground there.
I certainly will, and thank you for giving me the time to talk about this with you.
All right. God bless.
Take care.